Hello and welcome. My name is Evgeny Rusakov and you're watching TVP World, interview from Vilnius. Our guest today is Eitvydas Bajarūnas, former ambassador of the Republic of Lithuania to Russia, United Kingdom and Sweden. From 2020 to 2022, he witnessed firsthand how Russia was preparing for war politically, socially and through its media. Today, we will talk about what those final pre-war years looked like, how Russian society has changed since then, and what Russia represents in 2025. Eitvydas, thank you for joining us today, sir. Good to see you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So, Eitvydas, as I already said, you served as a Lithuanian ambassador to Russia between the 2020 and 2022, and you saw Russia's shift to war. So, how would you describe the last 2 years before the 24th of February 2022?
So, Evgeny, thank you very much once again for the invitation. I would probably not start describing 2 last years, because the endeavor, Russia's aggressive stance and Russia's willingness to invade neighbor Ukraine started much earlier. I would say this was the essence of Putin from very beginning. But if you remember the Putin's famous, the collapse of Soviet Union is
yes,
the biggest tragedy. Him being so sensitive to everything what was Soviet, symbolism, and him being constantly repeating this mantra of restoring Soviet Union glory. Under the Soviet Union, we were so much better off. So I think this was already a trajectory Russia under the Putin was taking. But then Ukraine, if you start with the famous Zbigniew Brzezinski saying that without Russia might be restored as an empire, but without Ukraine it would not be restored. With Ukraine it might be restored. So Ukraine is a big part of Russia's psychology, Russia's understanding, and Russia's historical, even sort of heritage. Without Ukraine, Russia is somewhere in the northwest of current Russia, around Moscow, Vladimir and other. But if you go to Kiev, it's much more historical, much more deep-rooted. So of course, for Putin, Ukraine was very much of his major target. I came spring 2020 and COVID and this hysteria around World War II. We were surrounded by enemies. Everyone around us enemies, and then Ukraine is part of our nation, and Russia was glorious in World War II. All this nationalistic, Russia's imperialistic stance was very much in the gears of Russian propaganda. And I was even joking with my friends that if you start from the morning program, then to 60 minutes of Skabeyeva, 60 minutes of Skabeyeva, right. And then this evening show with Vladimir Solovyov,
oh, yeah.
Ukraine would be like a 90% of topic. This is pre-war.
Fascism. So this is what you call a pre-war.
Fascism, nationalism, all the problems comes via Ukraine. So you might think that this was also part of preparation to get people to, because Putin is an authoritarian leader, but he still needs to have all the country, people around him on the board. So of course, this propaganda and cliché sort of pushing to the people mindset on Ukraine was part of the preparations.
Okay, so before you left Russia in June 2022, so did you have a chance to discuss this war with any Russian authorities, and what did they say back then? And how, in your opinion, has the perception of today's war changed after almost 4 years of this conflict?
I was probably not many official talks with Russia. Of course, I presented my credentials to President Putin. I have quite a few meetings with Minister Lavrov, with vice ministers, with politicians. But we have, of course, other channels, because we, as a part of the European Union, we have had quite a constant, regular exchange of views with our dear friends and colleagues, EU ambassadors. And of course, the message which was coming from Russia, first of all, it was constant lie. We are not preparing to the war. Everything is all this accusation by Western propaganda. That was one line. The other line, of course, if you remember, again, as far as the preparatory, 2020, Putin came with this famous article, famous in National Interest in US, and then it was translated into the Russia's media about World War II. World War II, we were alone, we were lonely, we won against fascistic, nationalistic Europe. So already then you saw this division. You fascist, we are good people.
We're defenders.
And then 2021 came even more epical article of Putin. Well, Putin himself is fan of history,
yes, I know that.
Claim him about Ukraine, where he very much described his philosophy that we are one nation. This creation of Ukraine is artificial. Everything what is now in Ukraine is more or less deviation from normal stance and all this nationalistic. So this good country under the name Ukraine, which is part of Russia, is simply kept by nationalistic regime, which of course was irony to have Jewish President Zelensky and accuse him as being the nationalist fascist. And then of course, end of December 2021 became even more, as now you can see in retrospective. 2021 was the period where Russia came with this famous ultimatum towards NATO, towards US. NATO shrink to the 1997 borders. NATO take all the troops out of Europe and so on. And of course, no Ukraine membership towards NATO. And the very stance of Russia 2021 December and the very way presenting ultimatum was shown that Russia is not interested into discussion. Russia, if you want to discuss with partner, you present, you give some time and engage into discussions. And this was like tomorrow you should agree. That was nonsense. But again, as we see now, this was part of preparations.
Okay, now looking at Russia in 2025, it seems that many of today's problems are not only political or economic, but also deeply cultural and mental. So the famous Russian and Ukrainian satirist Mikhail Zhvanetsky once said that patriotism is a clear, well-argued explanation of why we should live worse than others. I love this. To be honest, I love this expression. So when do you think Russia will realize that patriotism is about something else? When we were now, again, in retrospective, criticize our dear Western European colleagues and the leaders that this initial post-perestroika, post-cold end of Cold War period engagement of Russia has a big problem. One of them was we gave up to Russia all of our assets. We became dependent on Russia's energy export and so on. And of course, always answer was, and especially under the Chancellor Merkel, was mutual dependency. We buy Russia's oil and become dependent, yes, but Russia's selling us oil and gas and becoming dependent on us. So this is mutual dependency. That would be good with a country where the leaders are elected, where the leaders have accountability against their people, and where the aim of the politicians would be welfare of the country. But that was not Russia. For Putin has his own visions, nationalistic, imperialistic, and he didn't care about the people. He didn't care about what people think. Of course, everything was packed under the mantra of patriotism, Russia's glorious. But that was only sort of theater. But the aim of Putin was bigger: to destroy EU, to destroy NATO, to destroy current rule-based world order. Coming back to Putin and, let's call it, his Soviet mentality. So how deeply rooted is the Soviet mentality amongst Russia's political elite today?
Not only authorities, people. And this is
People.
People. This is, I think, the main also element which I trying to preach my Western and colleagues and officials. You know, once upon a time there was sort of cliché but simplified explanation of Russia. We should not look to the Russia as a Russia because there are authorities, Kremlin, and there are people. You know. But this simplified explanation of Russia has one big drawback.
Okay.
It led to the sort of conclusion that once we will remove this regime or regime will change, or say Putin will die because of biological age, we will have a bit better Kremlin and good Russian people. And this is the problem. I don't want to blame all Russians bad. You know, all Russians. I cannot buy this argument that there are no good Russians. There are good Russians. My dear friend Vladimir Karamurza, who I know for many years, and who stood openly speaking against the war in very first days, knowing that he will be arrested, and he was arrested and in prison for 20 years. Thanks God, 2 years ago he was liberated. But there are good people, and I would account around 20% of Russians still strongly oppose this war. They're still silent, many of them.
I don't see any other chance for them to be loud about this, to be honest.
And then, of course, there is a loyalist part, which also around 20%, which probably will go to the war together with Putin.
How about the rest? 60%?
And the rest is silent majority. But also knowing people, my generation, like me, born in Soviet Union, occupied part of Lithuania, we were the same. We all were the same. Silently, you continue to work, you continue to cherish your visions, ideas, even loving to the freedom. But you are part of this system, which you know that if you will make any deviation, you will be under cracks. We should see to the Russia as a very complex country. Not only this division, loyalists and against war, supporting war, but there are also nationalities. There are people under the various living standards. So all in all, Russia is very complex. But my biggest surprise was that this mentality of Soviet Union, or loving for Soviet Union, nostalgia was not only part of the older generation, which you might expect. You would meet the young Russian and start to talk about history, and I was even saying, we Lithuanians, Poles, Belarusians suffered even equally as you Russians because of repressions, the gulags, and I was saying, and I was alluding sort of Stalin is guilty, and young Russians said, "Oh, Mr. Ambassador, if I hear correctly, you say wrong about Mr. Putin's, our comrade Stalin." I said, "Yes, he's guilty."
They are surprised.
I was even he guilty not only because of many thousand Lithuanians, thousands. Oh, but he was good manager. How dare you can talk? That was biggest surprise for me to know that Russia, in current Russia, all the views are so much mixed. These anti-Western feelings, loving of Soviet Union, loving Russian Empire, everything is so much like a cocktail.
Okay, my last question, briefly. Do you think Putin loves his country and citizens of Russia?
Currently, he has his own visions. And in the way he treats his people, poverty in many parts of Russia, and this respect of values and rights, but also the number of casualties he eager to prepare to suffer in Ukraine shows that he doesn't care about people. He has his own vision to destroy the West.
That's a good point to end this interview with. So thank you for joining us today, and I really hope to see you once again in our studio.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. And I would like to remind our viewers that our guest for today was Eitvydas Bajarūnas, former ambassador of the Republic of Lithuania to Russia, United Kingdom and Sweden. You're watching TVP World. Stay with us.